Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Wellness Policy. My name is Wei Ting. Thank you again for joining us for another month here. I am joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Jordan Goodman and Neal Flanagan. How are the two of you?
Who wants to go first?
Let's go alphabetically. Jordan, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be with you. Neal, how are you? We can kind of do a circle or a triangle.
I'm pretty good as well. Yeah. Feeling a bit lazy at the minute, unmotivated, in need of a bit of a kick up the ass to eat better, do some exercise. So,
Neal, look at you teeing up this episode. What a professional you're turning into now.
I know. Well, aren't we all? Isn't that all the reason why we're all here is to maybe answer some of those questions about motivation and about just our bodies, our physical forms. And who are we joined by this month, Jordan?
I have a brother, a literal brother, and a literal good brother. We could even say a good man. His name is Justin Goodman. Let's bring him in. Welcome him to the Wellness Policy. Hello, Brother Goods.
Hello, Brother Goodman.
There we go. He has a voice. Justin, I eat kiwi now. If you can see this on YouTube. I'm a kiwi eater now. How do we feel about this?
I have some clarifying questions for you. So, do you eat it with the peel on it, or no? Do you go ahead and cut it open and like eat it with a spoon? How do you eat it?
So, I mean, I could demonstrate.
Please.
Again, postwrestling.com/YouTube. So I do bite like the peel just straight from it, and then I kind of skin it with my teeth. Like this?
Oh, that's very interesting.
I know John Pollock is loving this right now. So typically I don't use my hand right away, but I kind of have it in my mouth and I skin it with my top teeth and then I pull the skin out.
Can you tell us what kind of kiwi it is?
It's sun gold, I think they call it.
So it's not the hairy one.
Oh,
Wait, you know about this?
That's a big difference maker. I'm not a kiwi guy, so tell me about the difference. What is that?
I mean, it's just one's like more yellow on the inside versus that green flesh, and the one, there you go. Yeah,
it looks like a potato almost.
Very potato-like, but it doesn't have that hair on the outside. So I find it like, why would you take the wasted time to cut that thing open and try to get the rind off or the peel, right? The whole thing. I just eat the whole thing.
Am I losing like key nutrients by not eating the peel?
No, there's probably a good amount of fiber in that, but you're eating fruit. I think it's wonderful.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And you like it, right? Most importantly.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
So like more importantly than anything else, I mean, if you like the thing, you should eat the thing.
Well, what a great demonstration of Justin Goodman's key expertise here, a registered dietitian joining us here. This is the first time I at least on the Wellness Policy, we've had the two Goodman brothers. We have two Goodmans side by side here. Well, Neal, let's just analyze this picture for a second.
Oh, look at that. It's that way.
Like, it's quite the scene here.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Two handsome young men, it has to be said.
Do me a favor. Why don't each of you
Should we kiss? Like
no, you don't have to kiss. Sorry. But each of you put half your face on the edge of the screen so that you can make one hole.
Shit. Hold on. Get up here.
It looks like you're kissing now at this point.
Look at that.
That's good.
Neal, you must be bursting at the seams right now.
No, believe it or not, I'm fine. Please stop.
Wow.
Wait, Jordan, did you know to go the opposite way?
No, I don't know what I'm doing.
Wait,
this is episode 30 though. Let's acknowledge that. We've been doing this for 30 some months, and Justin, welcome to it. This is kind of fun. Yes.
This is wonderful.
Cool.
Yes, entering the dirty 30s here at the Wellness Policy, and very unprofessional of me to have my phone on. But hey, we are here to talk about the topics of health and of fitness. Jordan, you are a registered dietitian. You're also somebody who has. Oh, sorry, Justin. This is going to happen more than once on this podcast, I'm sure. But Justin, you also had a former career as a personal trainer, and this is a topic I've been wanting to introduce on the Wellness Policy for a long time now. For me, I'm about to turn 40. Got a kid, in the house, and I haven't remembered a time in my life where I've like been so like unfocused when it comes to my personal health, and I've been so undedicated to, you know, basically my own physical body. So, I wanted to have somebody, you know, come on the show to talk about it, and just Jordan's like, "Oh, my brother, you know, is it does all this," and I'm like, "Okay, that's perfect." So maybe, you know, before we kind of go on, talk a little bit about your own journey, what you do, and how it is that you've become who you are.
Sure. So, and it's funny as I say, sure, I start to feel like I'm already sounding like Jordan. He I'll say rubs off, but you know I don't want this to come out wrong after we just kissed. But he rubs off on me a lot. I find myself in practice. I often can hear myself, and I start to sound like Jordan very much so. But that's a kudos to Jordan. Yeah. So fitness and nutrition. It goes back to the conditioning with food, body dysmorphia, not maybe seeing myself in the mirror as maybe others are seeing myself present in the world. That goes back to middle school and then into high school. And of course, then observationally, I'm watching my mom, I'm watching others around who are following kind of diet and exercise routines. Some fad, some that have been around for decades. I'm trying to draw inspiration from that for my own journey, and I feel like I continue to hit dead ends. And around that time, high school into college, Jordan and I we started playing music. I started developing much more maybe disordered eating habits. Feeling like I would look better on stage if I was eating less. Uh, Not really having a North Star in either of these things, not really having anything concrete to turn to help myself. And so this kind of persisted into my 20s until I started to really just decide, well, if no one's going to help me, I'm going to have to help myself. So with fitness, I turned to some great friends, one being Jeff Blake and a few others to try to really figure out to get the body composition I so desired. What do I actually need to do that? And a lot of the input that I had was very backwards. Things like, well, if I lift heavy, I'm going to be this like overblown wrestler potentially. But of course, not realizing in context, but if I don't eat enough, how am I ever going to be a bigger human? Which is not what I want it to be. And then similarly with nutrition, I turned to podcasts, and for a long time I was very much like in my head as I was and I went back to school to become a dietitian, and I felt very much like a podcast dietitian, just kind of following the fringe of what others were doing. And of course, then that took me into where I am now, where I work in long-term care, subacute rehab facilities, and then my wife and I own a practice together, which is Grow, and there we get to integrate psychiatry with dietetics or nutrition to really help people with sustainable change. And when I look at this stuff, I mean, it's the psychological aspects of it, right? It's the nutrition. It starts with sleep into the next day. It's stress management and mitigation through things, finding modalities that work for you. And it's movement, and I really believe in finding what works for you, right? And everyone is their own unique individual. So like I could talk about my journey and what I eat and what I do training wise, but I just don't think that does justice for the individual, because there's a million ways to do this. And all you have to do is say yes, try some things, and look for what feels good. And when it feels good, follow that. And as necessary, you pivot. And when you need the help and you haven't found what you're looking for, look for experts in those fields. Look for someone who, when you have that conversation, you feel like, oh, I can relate, I can communicate effectively and collaborate with that person. So, I can talk about my stuff, of course, right? But I think it's for the individual, and obviously we can get into some questions of it too. But everyone's unique and everyone's on their own journey, and do a lot of seeking. And yeah.
Justin, can you describe the difference between what you are as a registered dietitian and a nutritionist, at least in
Sure.
the States?
Sure. So in the States, almost every state, there might be five. You have to go to school for 4 years. You do an undergraduate degree, university, college, and then you do a 1,200-hour internship. This is like clinical supervision. You do everything from food science to clinical work in hospitals, community work, etc. And then you sit for a national exam, and then you become a registered dietitian. In certain states, like here in the state of Maryland, you also have to pay to be licensed.
And then what do you have to do to become a nutritionist? Because I feel like those terms are often used interchangeably.
Absolutely.
And my understanding is that the barrier to entry to say that you're a nutritionist is like non-existent, perhaps, or very low.
Nailed it. Non-existent. Yeah. So anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. The distinction would be that someone in my position is the registered dietitian is the only one who can practice what we call medical nutrition therapy. So if someone medically is going through something, or like in the hospital setting, you would only find a dietitian, right? You wouldn't find a nutritionist. You need someone who has a legitimate background, evidence-based. Is trying to give someone a legit therapy through nutrition.
I was really glad to hear the way you described perhaps what you do as not just about movement, because so often I think when I think about fitness, I'm thinking, oh, okay, yeah, going to the gym, lifting weights, whatever, running. But from the sounds of things, it's certainly a much bigger picture that goes into it. And you pointed out several things, including nutrition, obviously, sleep, and also the mental aspects of just either staying focused and being motivated. Maybe care to expand on particularly maybe the mental side of things and how much it plays into somebody's ability to stick to whatever that they want.
Totally. Look, you can go to any practitioner. You can go to your friends too, right? And anyone could write what they think is the best prescription for someone. But if you're not going to follow all the C's, be consistent and compliant with it, then what do you really have, right? The mental aspect, I think, is very difficult because motivation is not always around. There's a lot of times you wake up and you're just not motivated to go do the things you need to do. Jordan, Neal, what do you do? Can I ask you, what do you do, Neal?
For exercise or
No. What do you do professionally outside of the podcast?
It's a desk job, yeah. I mean, it's kind of an administrator within the local government here in Northern Ireland. So a lot of sitting in front of a computer screen. That's usually my day.
Sure. So that comes with a whole other set of it. But so like Jordan, when you wake up, if you don't have a set schedule, if you don't have a set schedule, Neal, you, I'm sure, have to show up to somewhere on time. Yes?
It's a little looser since the pandemic because home working has become more, but yes, it's more ordered
Sure.
than I would imagine either way or Jordan's day is.
Sure. So in that sense, right, you might wake up and feel like, shit, I don't want to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Motivation is just not always around. And Neal, look, I go often, 4 days a week to a facility as well. And I don't always feel ready to get up and go and do it. But you show up and you do the best you can. And when you leave, right, that's fine. And you come back the next day, or it's the weekend, whatever the case may be, a couple of days may go by. You're going to show up again and try again. Not every day is going to be great. But when it comes to a movement practice, right, and motivation, or sleep and motivation, or nutrition motivation, right, it's not always going to be there. So you're going to try your best, and you give what you can. And as Jordan would say, right, be kind to yourself. And there's always tomorrow if today is not that day for it. It's difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people. But I think if you find stuff you enjoy, it makes it easier.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And part of what you were saying about, going through school and so on is that I never really latched on to one of the popular sports when I was at school, which over here, and particularly at my school, were things like rugby and, cricket and hockey, meaning the sort of lacrosse type hockey, field hockey, as you would call it across the pond. So I never got passionate about any of the sports that we played at school. And I know that can play a big part in fostering activity when you're
Sure.
younger, and also when growing up. I feel like the narrative from commercials and advertising was this food is low fat, therefore it's good. And it might be like some sort of yogurt that has 0 fat or very low fat, but it's absolutely packed with sugar. Whereas the balance appears to be, I know I'm talking in total basics, compared to your kind of
No, this is great.
breadth of knowledge, but it feels like that's been flipped, and it's kind of like refined carbs, including sugar, the things that we should try to avoid these days. So it can all get a bit confusing. I have found something I enjoy, and that's yoga. And I've mentioned this before, and I always do it with a bit of a smile because I know some of it's a bit dumb, a bit silly, but it's DDP yoga. I don't know if you're aware of this, Justin.
I know DDP. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Diamond cutter sense, but not, right. I know it's yoga. Right?
Yeah. So
too.
he's come up with this particular kind of brand of
Wait,
yoga.
this is legit Diamond Dallas Page yogurt?
It's pretty big.
Yoga.
Oh, yoga. I heard yogurt.
Yogurt.
Okay.
Being the salesman he is, that would be
yes,
next.
like
DDP yogurt.
Touchdown or something.
I'm just thinking about like the past like 2 minutes and like, what's Justin's reaction to Neal talking about getting a passion for yogurt? Like,
well, I guess I heard low fat yogurt, right? And I
I
thought
did
you
mention
said I found a
yogurt.
passion
I
for
guess so.
yogurt. I'm passionate about yogurt. It's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's good
All
for
right,
your
so-
gut
so,
health,
all right.
isn't it? But
Yes, yes.
I really enjoy it, even though it's a bit corny because he has all these weird names for the like he calls
Touchdown.
the sun salutation is I think touchdown, because it's your arms in the air like a referee or an umpire. Broken table. I know he's got all these like warrior poses. There is genuinely a warrior pose in like legit yoga, but he repurposes it to be like road warrior pose #1 and all this sort of stuff.
Makes sense.
However, when you get to the slightly advanced levels of it, I find that it's pretty good. Like it's like you begin to feel like you're strengthening your lower back, these sort of hard to reach areas. Your balance is getting a little bit better. Perhaps you're standing a little taller, poise, those sorts of things. So that was an example of something I found that I did enjoy. I've always found running, for example, a complete chore. And without wanting to monopolize the conversation or get too broad at this point on the food side of things, which I know is your day to day. Unless I find anyway, at least, unless I really find that I almost completely avoid the most refined carbs, like sugary things, sugary drinks, then,
oh, you just paused for like a good second there. Like you were
did
really,
I?
Yeah,
like,
This is when I
cliffhangering that whole that
Refined-
last sentence.
Yeah, refined sugary
Apologies,
drinks.
yeah.
No, you're
Unless
good.
I avoid those altogether, which is what I was saying, I find myself getting almost addicted. I feel it is an addiction, and I need to kind of just sort of cut those out. I don't know what your thoughts are on any of that. Bit of a long spiel from me, from yogurt to yoga.
All right, let's start with so I'll start with yogurt, right? I'll take the 3. I got this, right? The trifecta. So yogurt, sure. If you don't have any issues with dairy, right? Yogurt's wonderful. To your point, yes. Lactobacillus, right? Probiotics, great for the gut.
Excellent.
Lovely. Yeah, love that.
They do make lactose-free yogurt, don't they?
I'm sure they do. Yes.
Maybe, Justin, could you speak a bit more generally about Neal's point with the yogurt, where things marketed as non-fat from the perception of the public will like, okay, that must be healthy.
Sure.
Like any just like simple tips as far as when you're food shopping and what kind of language to look out for, either like good signs to look out for, but also things to be aware of.
Sure. So yes, low fat. Low fat was a craze for many decades, right? Often what we do is we demonize a macronutrient. So fat, proteins, or carbohydrates. If you told someone, maybe take one of these things out, you're probably decreasing calories in some sense. And for a world that may be still in a craze for people who want to lose weight, right? I think the marketing usually is not justified, but the market is driven that way. Low fat can be, again, context is always key here. So someone might say, hey, like include low fat dairy in your diet because you're getting all of the protein from it. You're getting the probiotics from it, from the yogurt part. But even if you're consuming just milk, you're getting protein from it, which is great. Vitamins and minerals, which is wonderful. But you're not taking in so many calories, and those extra calories coming from the fat. So they're skimming it like skim milk, right? But of course the marketing usually shifts, and then we usually have these a lot of like difficult maybe for the public to understand the why behind, right? We'll have a lot of what we will go through marketing in nutrition, often geared towards whatever is the latest craze or fad. For a long time, fat was demonized. Then sugar became demonized. Then we saw there was a New York Times article, butter is back. And people started to consume more full fat items. And often for me, I try to look at the macro picture of whatever the marketing is in the nutrition sphere, because it's easy to get lost in the kind of granular nature of whatever it is that you're consuming the most. But yeah, we often will see. I mean, we've lived through since the 90s, and I was born in the late 80s. High carb and low carb, Atkins, South Beach diet, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, all these different iterations of diet. Typically, at their core, you're in some sort of calorie deficit that makes the person lose weight, and they're usually for the person who's weight conscious and wants to lose weight, and maybe not like overall health, right? If they look and say like, well, my family has heart disease or diabetes or these other conditions run in the family and might be more genetic, but it's usually predicated upon weight loss, and the marketing is often for people who want to look a certain way in the world, right? Present in the world. And unfortunately, it's so much more nuanced than that. And what I feel like a big part of the calling for what I do for people, as well as my wife in the psychiatry field, is demystifying nutrition and psych disorders and psychiatry for people, right? I think there's just a lot of noise. I think the marketing, like what we're talking about, usually is much louder than the practitioners who are out there. I think also influencers and people on social media who maybe are nutritionists and don't necessarily have the same scholastic background, are often the loudest person in the room. And so it is then difficult to weed through. And all we really know is what we're fed, right? Not literally, right? But through advertisement and other.
It sounds like you're talking about a difference between like losing weight, which maybe a lot of media or at least advertising seems to promote, versus being healthy.
Right.
Yeah. Is that something that you've
realized? There are movements like health at every size. I mean, I think that again, it's difficult when you're doing marketing like that, because you're marketing to a general population, and you're doing it with not one specific person, but a specific demographic, right? Or a specific set of people who this is what they're looking for, and hence you can convert them to be a user or a buyer of that product. I think it's way more individualized, because people's thoughts and behaviors and ingrained nature when it comes to food and all these other things that we're talking about often is very unique unto that person, right? I would imagine what Jordan and I consumed growing up, and what we were around, and what was maybe special when somebody was making a special dish on a certain holiday, maybe is probably different from the fare that maybe Neal, you're consuming from your area, and Way in Canada, right? I'm sure it's similar but different, right? Also, our families and cultures are probably different too. So maybe what our thoughts and feelings and what makes us love food so much might be uniquely different for each of us. And so I think context is always such key when it comes to these things, and the marketing and often the noise that's out there may not be the best stuff to follow. And of course, that's why I always advocate, like, if you have questions about these things, it's best to go seek a professional in the field to help you to kind of weed through all the noise and kind of understand maybe fact versus fiction of sorts.
And what about yoga?
Yoga's wonderful, right? But of course, in context, if I hate yoga and Wei, you're like on the fence, like once in a never yoga, and Jordan, you're like, hey, once a week, I like yoga, and Neal, you're like 3 times a week yoga. Wonderful. I call that's your movement practice, and movement is very broad, specifically very broad, right? If your movement practice, like if you go from 0 to like, you know what, I'm going to walk from like here to there, that's beautiful. That's the start of your movement practice. Just like someone who's working on a breathing technique, maybe something that Jordan's a big fan of. One deep breath, right? Or one just, great. Now you have a breathing practice. Yeah. If you like yoga, great. If you don't, great. We can find something else, or you can find something else.
I wanted to perhaps talk about just nutrition in general. There's like we've kind of talked about, there's so much information out there, so many people trying to, sell you their idea of like what it means to eat healthy.
Mm-hmm.
How is a complete novice supposed to, maybe weave through all that to maybe gain some basic understanding of just this is what it means to maybe eat better?
Sure. So in a general sense, I would prioritize as best as possible, most of the time, not all the time. I believe we're the sum of what we do most of the time, not all the time. We're not looking for perfection here, just, a little bit of progress with these things. So whole foods, right?
Which are what?
Foods that are minimally processed. So typically, if we talked about the grocery store, I think Jordan talked about the grocery store, an example. Often this is like the old adage, if you shop around the perimeter of the grocery store, you find proteins in the meat section, right? Fish, beef, pork, chicken, etc. And you find it with these labels on them, but you see the only ingredient typically with those is one ingredient. It's just the animal itself, right? Similarly, eggs and dairy. If you go around, obviously there's going to be fruits and vegetables, maybe nuts and seeds, kind of the like 101 of unprocessed kind of whole foods. And then you have to, I think it's important to also honor stuff that you really enjoy, because this only works if there's a balance between what maybe you don't necessarily always want to do, or finding ways to incorporate more of the stuff that, maybe serves you a bit more. With a balance with some of the other stuff, like what we would call like hyper palatable, like the stuff that tastes really good, but is much more calorically dense, right? So more calories, stuff like chips and cookies and candy. And of course, I think moderation is often key. And I know this is to me, this can come off very boring, right? I'd love to like wax poetic and tell you that like, oh, you can do whatever you want and fuck off and your nutrition will be totally fine. It's typically not the case, right? Unfortunately, you can't be, I would say Kobayashi or Joey Chestnut, right? July 4th every day. But if you did that once in a while, I think you'll be okay. But yeah, so searching kind of like going around the perimeter of your grocery store, looking for whole foods, minimally processed, if that's 80% of your diet, wonderful. If you currently are someone who eats like fast food every day and like chocolate bars, maybe incorporating rather like one thing into one meal is a great place to start in that sense. But yeah, and then you just kind of build upon.
What I like about, I guess, your answer, especially at the end of incorporating one thing, that doesn't feel super intimidating or judgmental. And I think a lot of resistance, I experience it, people resisting mental health treatment, but I'd imagine seeking a treatment such as yours, Justin, is that people feel like they've been doing it wrong and they're going to work with someone who knows better than them, obviously, but because of that, they'll be looked down upon or feel judged, or they're going to have to change so much so quickly that it feels impossible or just intimidating at some level.
Sure. Yeah. So everyone comes with a different skill set, and everyone is in a different place, and you meet people where they are. Simple as that. And obviously this can translate to anything you're doing in life when you're working with people. You figure out where they are, and then you figure out all the other aspects that go into this. And psychology is massive. I mean, I often feel like I'm doing psychotherapy just through the lens of nutrition. And often what works for people is low and slow, take your time. If we change too many things at once, you never know what's working. And that doesn't help anyone. That often confuses people more. Typically, when I'm working with people one-on-one or in a group setting, we try to come up with, through effective or as best as possible communication and collaboration, something that they can be as consistent and comply to. So they have to tell me, like, if I told them, go outside and eat grass, and that's how you're going to like get to your goals, and they're like, well, Justin, I'm never going to do that. Then I'm like, okay, great. That's off the table. That's like the person who doesn't like yoga. If I said for your movement practice, you have to go to yoga. And it's like, well, I'm not going to go to yoga. It's like, all right, well, now if I sit here and then don't have an answer for the person, then we're done, right? That relationship is probably going to be over between the client or patient and practitioner. But often what works for people best is figure out what they're willing to try that helps to kind of push them or give them like a little nudge in the right direction. And I often talk about, whether it's like the first step of 1,000 or like the one brick that eventually builds the house. And also we can come up with the best plan. And if for whatever reason in the next week or 2 weeks or month when we follow up, if for whatever reason you haven't made any progress, hey, Justin, I tried and I wasn't able to do any of this. That's totally okay too. I just tell them, as long as they don't give up, you can't lose. And we've got forever to figure this out.
Have you ever eaten grass?
Maybe that 311 day. You want to share about that? Yeah, you want to talk about it?
It all comes back to 311 somehow, doesn't it?
Obviously.
You remember this?
Yeah, we were children, literal children at a festival, and the radio station was offering like biggest fans get to meet the band 311. So we just completely disrespected ourselves in public, putting like hair wax over our bodies with like, I guess, dirt and grass and cigarette butts and drawing all over our until the radio DJs, I guess, like just was like, all right, fuck it, just stop doing this and you can meet the band.
So that is that a path to maybe a healthy lifestyle? Maybe?
I usually say dog shit. Like if I told you to go outside and eat dog shits, and like, no, I haven't had dog shit, right? But if I told someone like, you really wanted a 6-pack, go outside and eat dog shit, and they're like, I'm not doing that. I'm like, okay, I understand.
It all goes back to 311. If you want to meet 311, that's all the motivation somebody needs.
Yes.
Maybe speaking a little bit about finding the thing that you love. What do you suggest to somebody to go and seek that maybe physical activity that they might like, because there's so many options out there? Any recommendations on how somebody might get started to find that thing that they might like?
Totally. If you're by yourself, look around and think of anything that could be movement related, whether that's starting with going for a walk, maybe that progresses into a jog or a run. Maybe you look up a YouTube video about calisthenics. So you're just going to do body weight exercises, right? Push-ups, jumping jacks, air squats, etc. Maybe like you don't have a gym and you're like, I really want to lift weights. And you just decide to go on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist and just get a set of weights and just start playing with them. And again, Google is a wonderful tool to be used. You can look some things up and just start trying some things. You also might have like a big bag of rice or potatoes. You can use those. Of course, that's kind of in context just by yourself, starting from zero and having no idea. It's kind of just saying yes to some things and seeing how they feel. If you have friends who are into fitness, or you find that one friend who likes it, ask them what they're into. Hey, would you mind sending the elevator down to kind of not bring me up to your level, because that might take years, but like start me on the journey and show me what you do. And maybe they've tried 20 things until they figured out what they like, but they could introduce you to a whole host of things. And as soon as you find one that you like, keep doing it. And of course, if at any time you start to feel like, I'm kind of losing it on this one thing, try something else.
Mm-hmm.
I would add for me, and right now I know way you've mentioned something similar, but at this point I feel like as stuck when it comes to the physical exercise, as stuck as I've been in my adult life, but for various reasons. But for me with the movement, it's like I like playing games. And so I enjoy frisbee. So, and I used to do that frequently with different friends, and I always still have a frisbee in my car. So like if the opportunity presents itself unplanned, well, I got a frisbee if you want to throw it around. But so, but even if I start playing frisbee, it's about the game, it's about the social connection and the play with my friend. But I'll notice I'll start jogging more and asking a friend to throw it where I have to run to it like a dog. So I start sneaking in the physical exercise because I'm already engaged with the game. And so I'm not thinking of it in terms of, oh, I have to get a workout in. So, and I'll feel good about myself or I'll feel physically better. It's kind of just finding the opportunities to increase physical exertion. And I get to Justin's point in ways that are a bit more naturally attractive to us.
Sounds like it's play, isn't it?
Yeah. And so it's not like you have to quote unquote like take your medicine, right? But the medicine is kind of part of the play. And then there's plenty of opportunity for that. I guess part of it is just keeping this stuff more top of mind so we can like seek the opportunities when we're in any particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think there are many rules to any of these things, right? I think you're the master of your own ship, right? You're the one driving the car, right? So in that context, yeah, if playing, right, and of course it's just semantics, then, right? It's just like whatever you want to call it. But if you want to play frisbee, I mean, people play ultimate frisbee, and that's a sport, and it's not like, oh, now we have to think like, well, because that's a sport, then that's validated, right? Who has to tell you like that that's real or not, right? If you physically feel like you're moving your own energy and you have like this is part of your it doesn't have to be a practice, right? But just what you like to do movement wise, I think it sounds great. I mean, and you know, look, Jordan and I, we often go to outdoor venue concerts during the summertime. And a lot of times at that certain venue, we will play frisbee. But you know, I haven't heard this, and we haven't played frisbee this season. But if you had shared that, I would have said, "Oh, let's make sure like we make time for that."
I think that might be a bit like looked down upon at a particular venue this season.
Even in the back corner where no one is.
I think
Are they banning frisbee?
I don't know if it's an outright ban, but I've been told like, hey, maybe let's not push certain things when we're able to get away with certain other things that are better than frisbee.
We can go to the park. Fair.
The park is lovely.
Yeah, the park is great. But also, right, you can go to the park and bring a frisbee with you. And if you have the personality or you dare to put it out there, you can kind of like wave it at the people that are walking by and just, you know, you ready, you know, and wait for it and then flick it to them. And then you can just turn. Jordan, I can see you doing this, right? You just turn and you just take off running as fast as you can and hope that they can like, you know, just lob one to you.
Whatever it takes to get me moving, I suppose.
Whatever it takes. I'm here for all of it.
You know, I've talked about this before. I talked about it with Matt Halpern, mutual friend of both of you, former co-host of Chocolate Croissants, which I encourage everybody to go check out the archives with between Justin, Jordan, and Matt. But I had spoken to him a little bit about jiu-jitsu, and for me, the last time I really fell in love with any sort of physical activity was through a system like that, where exactly like you said, Jordan, it felt like I was going to play. I happened to be playing a game that, you know, through the use of my body that like gave me a great workout at the same time. Why I ultimately stopped it was through, I mean, a lot of it's time management, but also it was through a series of injuries, and setbacks were a thing that I constantly ran into, that, you know, I would find myself like working up the motivation just to simply go back. And then I would go back and then I'd get hurt. I'd be off for another month. And then it would just be this constant cycle of just not being able to build that momentum. Have you ever like run into these sort of like obstacles, and how have you managed to try to get through them?
Yeah, totally. So I went to the same gym where Matt goes, where he trains, BJJ. And what I found was, unfortunately, everyone attacks one side. And that kind of blew my mind. I would have thought that, oh, you try one side and then you attack the other, but everyone kept attacking my left side. And I have an old labrum tear or something. I'm gonna get an MRI, I think, this week. But this is like 3.5 years ago, wrestling old injury. And every time I ended up in like Americana, Kimura, these positions that are kind of moving my arm around and working my shoulder, I just found that it was too sore afterwards. And I could go maybe 2 days and then feel like, all right, I need like a week to recover. And also maybe the rolling, some of the things like this was in the gi, so you're wearing looks like a robe if you're uninitiated, and the grip on certain things, and then I could feel even more so that like I'm like this is not healthy. Of course, look, if that's the case, you pivot as necessary again, right? So like, yes, this feels good. Maybe I need to work on what I need to like take care of physically so that I can then go back and do that thing I enjoy. And of course, time constraints are always going to be a thing. What I see with Matt, when he gets into something, he really gets into it, and he often will make the time available for those things. And he has a different schedule maybe than someone who's working like a 9 to 5, but he still works and does his thing, and he'll find his way. Like he'll have his own mats, and he'll make friends with people in the gym, and he'll invite people to just come over to his house and roll. So it's a little bit more convenient. I know you have a young one at home, and I see a lot of people will turn to, okay, if it's too much for me to drive 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes to a place to like, utilize some sort of like physical fitness or do something physical, some sort of movement, they'll try to bring it home as best as possible. So, if you have a garage or a basement or somewhere, even if you had mobile, I have a friend who has mobile mats, and he had it in an apartment building. And he would just open them up so that he could do it at home and work around his normal schedule and get even 30 minutes in.
Wait, I'd come over and roll with you if you want.
All right.
You had your chance
Sure.
2 weeks ago, Jordan.
Yeah.
I know.
Get that
fucked
passport
up.
ready.
Yeah.
Fuck
Yeah. I will share. So Justin used to teach weekly fitness classes at a couple different trampoline parks. And I attended that for a couple years, it seemed, and very fun, maybe like 7-8 years ago. And I actually dislocated my shoulder during one of these sessions. A quick story, and it's a dumb story, so I'll share it. At the end, we would sometimes, like you kind of spring into one of those foam pits. You guys familiar? Like the big blocks of foam. So we would sometimes do a thing where we kind of spring into the foam pit and kind of swim or race to the net and then turn around and come back. And it was an odd number of people in this particular group. And I think I may have been the only guy. So I was kind of odd man out, literally. So I went by myself at the end. So I was actually just racing myself. And as I was swimming back, I just felt my left shoulder kind of pop out. And I just started slowly like sinking into these blocks of foam. It was terrible and deeply embarrassing, but that's part of what was enjoyable about the experience in hindsight. I had years of physical therapy, like after the fact, with a couple different physical therapists, but like, it's not right. It's not how it was. I avoided surgery, and that's great, but like I'll try to do push-ups or lift certain weights, and I noticed the pain has shifted, and some goes into the neck and some goes into the bicep. And I guess it's something I've been struggling with, of like, I'll sometimes feel really motivated to do certain things, and then I do the things that either I know and or like, and then I suffer, like I experience pain because of it, and then I start getting discouraged, and I'm like, fuck, I don't know what to do. And I don't know if this leads to a question or if I'm just sharing my experience, but that's kind of one of the bigger things that has made me feel stuck in a general sense with physical fitness, just because I'm not sure what to do that won't cause more pain. as a result. And I'd imagine as we get older, that's going to be more and more common for all of us, unfortunately.
It depends, right? I mean, there are people who figure out ways to stave off or mitigate a lot of these issues, right? Maybe some things that are genetic based, hereditary, you can prescribe or ascribe the best plan for that person, and this would be more in like a nutritional context. And unfortunately, they still get cancer or heart disease, or other Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. But in this context, with movement, I mean, the goal as we get older, I always think about this. The goal as we get older is to not get hurt. And so if we can show up consistently and do whatever that is, like take risks, but make them much more calculated, not like when you're 14 or 8 on the playground and you're like jumping off the monkey bars or something, right? Or like climbing the tree and falling down and smashing yourself. Like if we can show up every single day and still do something physical, we can probably stave off a lot of these like, oh, the sciatica nerve in my lower back, or my back hurts, my hips hurt, my knees hurt. Neal, like you and I might sit a bit more. I don't know, Way and Jordan.
Definitely probably sit as much, if not more, than the both of you.
Okay, fair enough, right? So, we can be mindful of these things and we have the ability to change them. And Jordan, like specifically, if you have one thing that's hurting, you can obviously go address that. You can go see an orthopedic. You can go ask a professional like, hey, can you like MRI this or X-ray it? Tell me what's going on. And like, what do I really need to do to fix this long term? But in the interim, work around it. You have everything to do with your lower body. So if you wanted to do air squats or jog in place, and I've seen you do all of these things while watching pay-per-view, where you probably just feel like your energy is a little stagnant and you need to move.
Let's talk about that real quick, because this came up with Way and Neal when we briefly discussed this show last week. Sure. And I shared with them that since a child, I've often worked out by myself at home in my room. There's times on and off where I've gone to gyms and did things like the trampoline course, but often I'll just have like a free weight or a couple free weights, and that's kind of it. And I'll, do jumping jacks, sit-ups, run in place, shit like that. But similar to how people will use music, and I see someone in the YouTube comments mention music being a motivator, helping them kind of work out more frequently. I've often used pro wrestling as motivation. So not only is it just like the physicality of the wrestling that kind of motivates me, I feel more kind of in tune with just my own physicality, but it's just the energy of it. So, and I've always been attracted to pro wrestling and particularly rock music. And I think a lot of that is just the bigger energy of those things. And that's why if you're working out, then you'll typically listen to a more aggressive type of, let's say, a rock music, or a more aggressive type of hip hop versus classical music, typically for most people, let's say. And Way and Neal said they did not relate to my experience. But for me, like pro wrestling was always not just the visual stimulation of, men and women that are athletically built, but the physical aggressiveness of what was happening, but also just the energy of the crowd and the music and the pyrotechnics all created conditions for me where it felt that created a sense of momentum, or like a foundation for me to like build from.
So what were you doing? Like air squats, and like what was your routine during?
Can I share? Let me share.
By memory. Yeah, I'm curious what you remember.
Well, physical fitness, I can vividly remember you not in like a wrestling context, but like at home we would have these free weights that have little clamps on the side, and he would put maybe like 10, you'd have like 10 pounds or 15 pounds, and you'd be like grunting, just like doing like just doing bicep curls, right? Just doing bicep curls. But it's like, you can tell now in hindsight, like knowing Jordan as well as I know him, I'm sure there was a lot of energy that just was not getting out. Right? It maybe wasn't being channeled. And so now I can think back and go like, oh, he was just trying to let the lead out. Like whatever was in there, this was the way that he chose to channel it. And maybe like you didn't know like that's what it was, but we had one of those door frame pull-up bars, and I would just see you just banging out chin-ups or pull-ups, and then I would see you grab weights, and I'd see you like there'd be like this like heavy just grunt, just like letting energy move from internal to external. And maybe it's because it wasn't you weren't as able to in other aspects. It was just like I think or you were really into it, but also the music. You'd put on CFO Money maybe, or like WWE theme songs.
Hell
and,
yeah.
and just like get the fuck into it.
Because for me, it's like this like Pavlovian like association or response where, okay, if I put on the wrestling theme playlist, well then, and I would often do that at the gym as well when I'd go to a gym, that now I see the crowd and the lights and like the theatrics of that bigger energy, which made it more interesting or palatable or like helpful for me to invest in the hard work. I mean, why do most people not like do this? Because it's fucking hard, right? So we need to find the things that help support us, and it can be like so vast. And I think part of what Justin is trying to express here is that we need to experiment and explore and just taste a lot of stuff and try different things and ask ourselves consistently, is this helpful or is it not? If it's not, then maybe try the next thing. If it feels maybe kind of helpful, okay, like what is helpful about it? And maybe we could be more specific and go closer to that in that direction. I like, Justin, that's kind of what you have in mind with me with the free weights. But it speaks to what you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, not thinking about just movement or just nutrition or just sleep, but stress management. And for me to be physically engaged with lifting weights or using a pull-up bar, similar to me beating the shit out of a drum set, that was stress management for me. And that was very helpful. But it was stress management in ways that I found to be productive and have other desirable outcomes, such as getting better at a musical instrument or building my body in a certain way, instead of stress management via getting into a fight with a kid at school, for instance, or you know, getting drunk and like kicking shit around the house or whatever. That can relieve stress, but it's not necessarily productive. It's more destructive.
Look, for me personally, and I'll speak, you know, this is my own like experience, of course, and this is not for me to then project. This is like anecdotal because this is what I experience in life. I find that like I like the gym. I love the endorphin rush. I like the dopamine, the serotonin that comes from it. I often think like when I sit in the sauna, part of that is for me is just de-stressing. I like the heat. I like sweating. It feels good. Lifting weights, powerlifting, like lifting heavy, that all feels good to me. I like running, and I know I often feel like the odd one out. Although I found that a lot of people say this. I think Neal, maybe you said it, that you hate running. But like the more you do it and the better or the stronger cardiovascularly you get, you start to realize like, oh, this is not so bad. And then you get what people refer to often as that runner's high. Again, it's just endorphins being released. It feels good. You're sweating. And to Jordan's point, I love the motivation of something motivational. And I know there's a lot of like the stoicism that's out there and people who would tell you, yeah, but like you're not always going to have motivation around, kind of like what we talked about earlier, right? Motivation waxes and wanes and falls in all the gray areas, right? But like who doesn't want competitive advantages, right? There was like a time that like biohacking in all of these fields was like a massive buzzword. Everyone talks about biohacking. And like, to me, I think music, or sometimes I'll be running on a treadmill and I'll watch these ultra marathon documentaries that I'm so inspired by. The feat of, oh, I'm going to run 100 miles through the mountains, you know, and it's going to take me a day and a half. And my crew is there and the camaraderie and the support of the team. And as I'm watching that, I'm like, oh, I'm only running like 5K maybe, like, or less. Like, oh, if I start to feel tired or get kind of sore, like I can find motivation. I can find a why to keep going. And similarly, it's interesting. More recently, I go to the gym and often my days have gotten longer than what maybe they used to, but I still try to be mindful. Hey, just show up and do something. I don't care what you do. It doesn't have to be revolutionary or following some sort of protocol. Just like go there, move around, get some energy out. And a lot of times I find that I'm listening to a podcast versus listening to music. And I know that if I were to switch it to something that was maybe heavier, Queens of the Stone Age put out an album recently, and it's fantastic riff rock. If I put that on, I'm way more fired up and ready to like go do some stuff versus like, oh, I've got the MMA hour on and I'm just listening to another interview that I do for, 8-10 hours every week, like clockwork. I'm like, yeah, it's, it doesn't have the same motivation. It's enjoyable, but it's not as motivating maybe as the music. I'm curious, Wei, it sounds like maybe you guys talked about this last week, Wei and Neal. Music doesn't add something. Is that what Jordan was alluding to?
No, it was wrestling we were talking. By the way, nice pun, Queens of the Stone Age saying like clockwork. But
I didn't mean to, but thank you.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, lovely.
No, Wei and Neal didn't relate to my experience of using like watching wrestling as
energizing.
Yeah, or motivation through inspiration of some kind.
Got it. Okay.
But like, Wei, I'll start with you. Like, when you, whatever physical routines you've had in the past, how much did you factor music into the experience?
Pretty often. Yeah, almost exactly like what you guys said. Even like for like, something like a jiu-jitsu competition, not like to get ready and to kind of get psyched up for it, I would definitely listen to music. When I'm working out, yeah, I always listen to music. When I'm watching wrestling, it's more like, obviously because of my job, it's much more analytical. So I sit down, even if I'm not taking notes, I find that I get really distracted either with the working out or with the wrestling, that it takes away from the workout. But music is just, something that's just almost like guttural, right? Like you just have to kind of put it on in the background. You might, get psyched up. So, but yeah, it's definitely worked for me then.
I relate to that. I also wanted to touch on just the kind of what you talked about with running and so on, Justin. I dislike it. I've always disliked it. And it made me think of that there's kind of an onboarding process with any of these things. And I suppose that goes for dietary changes as well. And I've always found that the easier that is, the more likely you are able to maintain a habit and go up that growth curve. And as much as I've made fun of the Diamond Dallas Page's version of yoga, it's so simple to begin with. It's a 20-minute, like you're just kind of doing some basic stretches, and so it's like, this is easy, and then the next stage is just a tiny bit more difficult. So I really enjoyed that because it's very doable, as opposed to trying to play tennis with friends who are much better at tennis than I am. And I'm not going to enjoy that experience because I'm going to get whooped, So likewise, going to the gym with friends who go a lot and lift weights, and I'm struggling a little, So I suppose a personal question for you, have you always had some level of physical fitness just from being an energetic kid or something like that? Or did you have to sort of go through some sort of motivational wall to get to the point where, hey, I love running, I love doing weights, being in that kind of mindset?
No. So going back to kind of the beginning and my why for becoming a dietitian, when I was in middle school and I started to not recognize, but I now in hindsight can recognize that a lot of my behaviors were I was able to utilize food as kind of my drug of choice of sorts. When I was feeling a certain way, I would turn to food. That was the thing that in the moment could make me maybe not feel better, but it could help me in some sense get through what I was going through. And this was a negatively now like ingrained behavior. So 8th grade comes around. This would be the end of like your middle school, and I'm in wrestling, right? Standard like collegiate wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I was maybe 5'1", 5'2", very short. And I was 165 pounds. So the guys that I was wrestling were like, a whole head taller than I was. And I would shoot, if you guys know wrestling, right? I would take a shot on them for like a single leg or a double leg. And their legs, when they would sprawl, like kick their legs out, would be like light years away from what I could even grab onto. I mean, it was pretty embarrassing. And unfortunately, it wasn't like I had anyone I could really turn to help me navigate where I was going with these things. When I was 16 years old was when I started to just try some things through diet and exercise. And it was like, I really didn't know what I was doing. So I think maybe to the part of like a bit of like education and like understanding and context for the thing that you're doing of like why this may work, I think can be revolutionary for a lot of people. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying stuff and getting results. It was like, all right, I kind of figured I needed to do more cardio to lose weight, which I realize now, like, well, if you're in a calorie deficit, you'll lose weight. But I didn't know that. I just thought like, oh, maybe people who do these things tend to look a certain way.
Mhm.
So if I diet, maybe I'll look more of like the person I want to see in the mirror. If I run and do a lot of cardiovascular exercise, maybe I'll look more like a runner. And that persisted for a very long time. I went to a trainer at 16. I was probably 25 pounds heavier than I am now. And I lost that weight, and I've kind of maintained where I am ever since. And this is going on about almost 20 years now. But a lot of that was like, I definitely didn't understand the why behind any of the stuff. And even the trainers, they weren't helping me to understand. I just thought, again, like if I lifted those heavy weights, I was going to look like a very big human. And that wasn't what I wanted. And it wasn't like they were answering these questions. For whatever it's worth, I also went to a therapist or a psychiatrist, I think it was. And I remember telling them how I felt about my body and how I looked and presented in the world. And they did the thing that like I think is the worst. They didn't validate how I was feeling. They didn't offer any sort of empathy. They kind of just dismissed it and said, oh, that's not real. And like, no matter what people are going through, of course, right? You have to validate how people are feeling and at least have understanding for that. So it was a very hellacious uphill battle. I figured it out. Look, I was in my early to mid 20s, maybe 22, 23, and I took a gap semester. Wasn't sure what I was doing with life. And I found a book, The Non-Runner's Guide to a Marathon. I had never ran more than 5 kilometers in my whole life. And I thought, oh, 26.2 miles. I guess that's what I'm doing. And this was a very like all or nothing black and white approach. Like I saw the hill and I always was like, oh, cool, I'm going up that hill. Like this is not necessarily like healthy ingrained behavior, but I thought, okay. And fortunately, Jordan was teaching drums to someone who's the student's parent was on a weight loss journey, and he was running a lot, and he helped me get through this thing. But I finished the marathon and was disappointed because I didn't look like a runner. I thought, oh, if I do all this work, I'm going to look long and lean, and it was disappointing because I did it for all the wrong reasons. None of this came necessarily like natural. A lot of it was just seeking knowledge and understanding and like why this stuff actually works. And once I figured that out, then I think a lot of it became much more enjoyable. And yeah, and difficult.
Do you have any resources that you might recommend for sort of just like some of those dietary basics or just, again, so much information out there. What's somebody
Totally.
to do to just maybe even get started?
Yeah. So when I was in my mid 20s and I was really just listening to a lot of podcasts, I listened to a lot of Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Dr. Peter Attia. I find now looking back that I'm much more aligned with and I identify with Peter Attia in what he speaks about in regards to like kind of the same stuff I'm talking about, right? That sleep and nutrition and movement and stress and longevity and trying to stay around a long time and be healthy, right? Live a long life, but not just like be around a lot of years, but have quality with the quantity. And more recently, I heavily identify with. There's a guy. I'm not on TikTok, but I find his stuff always being shared through other social platforms. He goes by Dr. Idz. It's IDZ, and he often is just out there trying his best to lead the charge on debunking a lot of what more so influencers, but even other contemporaries for him, other doctors are putting out there, which often is very restrictive, trying to showcase some sort of like panacea, like, oh, if you do this, you'll get those results you so desire. And he often pushes back on a lot of the people who like to out there just create a problem and then solve it for you by pushing something. So again, his like what he showcases or shares out to the world, often it just goes back to the basics. He keeps it very simple. And often I think of this as like, get very comfortable doing the boring things. But I don't think it's that boring if you find the stuff that you enjoy and you know that these things work in that context.
Yeah, please.
Just a quick point before we get to the causeway. Justin, would you say a big part of your journey when it comes to all that we're talking about has been self-acceptance over time, learning to accept this is your body composition, this is your height, etc. Because a lot of what you're describing is you want it to look like a runner, or you want it to be, looking like someone else that performs music on stage. How do you factor in just your evolution of self-acceptance with your journey?
Sure. A lot of years of a lot of hard work and like understanding for self, but also putting in the work to also like recognize that like maybe I actually trying to see myself for what it really is, and then being able to do the work of like, if I really want to change this, let me seek out professionals or others who can at least guide me in the right direction. So like all the energy I'm putting into something is for something. Like hopefully there's a goal on the other side. But also like just seeking and having better knowledge and insight into what body dysmorphia is. I for sure went through bouts of undiagnosed binge eating disorder. Like if you look in the DSM-5, all the psych disorders, like I would meet criteria, I would imagine, for that. And even more so, a newer one, which is orthorexia. I think through a lot of the lens of social media and other things that were out there, a fear of like eating outside of what I deemed maybe healthy, or what people would maybe say like clean versus dirty. And it's nice to now have a better understanding, not only for self, and an understanding for others and empathy for others to be able to help them in that sense. But a lot of my journey was, yes, self-acceptance, but also being the thing that I so longed for, the beacon that I was missing. Like I vowed that, I didn't have what I was looking for, and I didn't have the answers for what I was looking for. So like I, took a 10-year plus journey of self-exploration and then like, world exploration to figure out how does all of this work? What's the context? What's the why behind all of this? And then now how can I best serve other people? And it's not like my anecdotal experience. Now I say, well, because it worked for me, I push that upon other people. I have this newfound skill set, and I've put all these hours into obtaining the knowledge around all of these subjects. How can I best serve someone else?
Wonderful. There's so much like that you just kind of have mentioned in these past few minutes that I would love to just get in on that much more, but we are on a bit of a time limit. But we do want to also make time for those of you that might be listening to us live. So if you go to the show description, or if you go to the podcast email that you found this link for, you can find a call-in link if you want to have your say, or if you just want to type something in the chat room, we can read that as well. But first, let's go to, I believe, a first-time caller here on the wellness policy. Johnny, welcome to the show.
Howdy.
Johnny.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Yep.
Hey.
I did actually call on for the father episode.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
which
My
kind of
apologies.
brings me to the fun point of like, I'm on parental leave now, and I've been finding that it's almost kind of like an unhealthy good diet. in that like I haven't been eating as much. I snack a lot more. I move around so much more, and suddenly I lost 5 pounds. It's kind of a crazy thing, but
I found the opposite. To be
oh
honest,
really?
yeah, I
Yeah.
gained 5 pounds third off, but yeah.
But so like the I guess my journey with exercise especially was prior. We went to Jamaica, I think in 2015 or something like that, and before then we were eating out all the time, pizzas, eating, chicken Kievs that you throw, just lazy meals. And then we went to Jamaica, we got some pictures done, and I saw them. I'm like, I don't think I like how I look. It's not how I envision myself looking, I suppose. But then after that, my wife was just like, we should, maybe cut out all the stuff. Let's start trying to eat more healthy. So one book we found, Anna Jones's recipe books or cookbooks. So it's all vegetarian meals. But the thing I liked about it was the fact that these are vegetarian meals, but not made in such a way as meat replacements. These are just recipes that are the vegetables are the main ingredient essentially, and we found that to work perfectly for us. Like we don't want to sacrifice flavors. We don't want to make fake bacon by using jackfruit or something like that. And on top of that, with eating better, we were finding that maybe let's just go to some classes. And I think it always takes a good trainer or an instructor to kind of motivate you to keep going more and more. So we did these classes. We had this one trainer, Glenn. He taught these classes. He's an older Asian guy, but we love him to death. And he would just like kind of kickstart everything, just motivate us to keep going and going. And after that, when COVID hit, couldn't go to classes anymore. So we were thinking like, okay, maybe we should just start going to weight rooms, whatever might be open at that time. So with that, we're finding like I would do weight rooms. My wife would do a lot of cardio and stuff like that. And the biggest benefit, aside from the change in body, was like physically, I was sleeping way better. Mentally, like Justin was saying, with like the big stress relief of just sweating it out. It's not like you're not focusing on other things, but you're focusing a lot on your exercise, the sweating, and that's all you can think about at the time because you're exhausted and there's nothing else around you except just being tired, but you're feeling good about it. Though the one tricky thing now, especially with the kid, is trying to find places to go to exercise and stuff like that. I think a lot of the big gyms have child minding, which is a great benefit as well. But and I guess to my last point, going to the gym was always very intimidating to me, just because media portrays it as meatheads going there, everyone's working out beautiful, everyone's judging the big guy, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, in reality, nobody really cares. Everyone's just there to do their own thing. If anything, everybody's rooting you on. They see you there. You're there for a reason. Of course, you're not going to get ripped in a day, but everyone's there to cheer you on. Everyone has a common goal in mind there, and that's just to feel better mentally or physically.
Thank you so much for sharing, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, right? First and foremost, right? In your area, there's probably multiple gyms. I know, Jordan, you've spoken about this a lot, right? Like it wasn't a common thing, and then it became very common in a certain decade. And then same thing with like finding a yoga center on every block, right? Et cetera. I mean, obviously, sometimes in certain areas there's a heavy powerlifting focus or like weightlifting gym, but you can find there's many inclusive gyms. I think hopefully most people are looking through the lens of like, oh, everyone's just trying to get better. And of course, I think it was like, you're not going to get ripped in one session, but you didn't become the position where you currently are. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't one meal. It wasn't one donut or one salad that made or break, where the person is. So If it took 20 years to get to become the person where you are, and if it takes 20 years to unravel it, that's okay. Just get started. Yeah, I think part of the journey with all of this is, whether it's nutrition or physical fitness, sleep or other, is being more of the driver, maybe not the car. So I think a lot of times out of convenience and the stress of life and everything else, yes, it's convenient to just grab food out, right? Carry out. And oftentimes, like, they want that food to taste really, really good. So they're going to sneak in all the extra chef tricks, right? More butter, more oils, et cetera, that, like, stuff that's probably a little bit more calorically dense or rich, without you maybe even knowing it, right? Cheese, butter, cream, et cetera. And I think learning to cook is massively wonderful for everyone. So that way you know what's going into these things. I also think it's, and again, a lot of this is in context driven. If someone can get on the scale, let's say, and if they give a lot of power to the scale, then I would say, like, maybe the scale is not the metric we want to use to gauge things. But similarly, when it comes to cooking, I would say more people should probably, like, flip the box around or whatever the food is they're cooking and, like, read the nutrition label and figure out, like, all right, there's, like, calories and there's protein and fat. Like, what are all these things and how do they play in context to, like, me becoming a maybe healthier human, or just, trying to have better understanding for these things. I think that goes hand in hand with the cooking part. Yeah, I think there was a lot of good, great stuff to unpack there. And I'm so pumped for Johnny and all the stuff that he's doing.
In the chat room here, an earlier comment from Adi says, sorry, my computer is just so damn slow recently. Finding a gym where I like the people, environment, and music has been the difference between going 4 times per week and 2 times per week. So thank you very much for sharing. I mean, just even 2 times sounds pretty good right now. Let's go also to Brandon from New Jersey, who says, I listen to presidential history when I'm doing my 4-mile runs. LMAO. So
there's no rules, right? I mean, there's no
whatever
rules.
works for you.
Yeah,
I guess, Brandon.
Thank you very much one for
that.
Adi, the one with Adi, quickly. Look, I think we talked about BJJ, and I saw going to Matt's gym. Jordan and I could talk about when I was doing trampoline fitness classes. A lot of what was great was the group, right? And if you didn't show up, someone was going to text you, or, like, Facebook message you or shoot you a text, call you, whatever, and be like, yo, where are you at? What's up? Why are you not coming? I see that heavily in the martial arts community. Like, if you're coming for a while and then you just stop showing up, everyone's going to be concerned. Like, is everything okay? Like, do we need to do something to get you back?
Well, the key word, you said it, Justin, is community.
It's the community.
Even on a smaller scale, I like what Johnny's sharing, that, he and his partner with this cookbook, having others can not only help keep us accountable, but oftentimes, like, it's easier to let ourselves down than it is to let the other person down, right? So during lockdown, I was playing a lot of tennis with a friend, and I would like to schedule it with him because I knew even if I didn't feel like it, I would still go because I didn't want to tell him, hey, man, I don't really feel like doing this right now. But also just to share your journey, even if someone else is not going to go on your fitness or nutrition journey with you, just having someone to share that experience with, I think, can be very powerful. So we're not as alone in the experience, and especially the struggles in our heads and our bodies as we're going through it.
Might actually be a good segue to maybe the last thing I want to talk about. I wanted to get your thoughts, Justin, on, like, like, often you see 30-day sort of, like, challenges as maybe like a way to get people interested in something. How do you feel about those?
This is such a bad answer, but it's like the classic practitioner or, like, dietitian answer. It depends, right? I mean, if I try to answer that, like, painting everything with, like, the same big fat X or, like, check mark, it's just unfair to the individual. Like, if that's the thing that you try a whole 30 or a 30 days of push-ups for St. Jude's, or I'm going to do this and the other, like, if that's the thing that kicks you off and, like, you're kicked in and inspired, the community starts to, like, get involved and everyone's cheering you on, wonderful. And if it's the thing where you find, like, Man, I'm on day 150 of 30-day challenges, and like, well, maybe this works too, right? I'm on day 150, and I'm actually like getting results, and I just keep picking 30-day challenges. Well, then fuck yeah, that sounds great. But
Mhm.
if you're on day 150 and you keep trying these things, and like, you're not really like moving the needle, then maybe that's not the thing that is going to help you with like long lasting potential behavior change of sorts.
On
Um,
that on that score, Justin, given that Jordan and Way and I are all here and we're all sort of looking to make some sort of change. No, obviously you haven't had time for proper consultation with us, and know our dietary intake and particular needs. But would you have a broad, and it would need to be very broad, I guess, under those circumstances, kind of recommendation for perhaps a 30-day goal, or a 4-week goal for the three of us, something we could do, and perhaps check in on each other and so on.
Yeah, give me a little bit more context. Do we want to do fitness or nutrition?
So because of how broad I would say, and not just between the three of us, I would love to be able to involve everybody listening right now. And of course, the best way to check in with the wellness policy is through postwrestling.com/discord. Perhaps we open it up, I think what we have right now is just maybe something, relatively kind of fun, like a 30-day period between this show and our next show to be able to check in with each other and to be able to say, are we doing the thing that we've maybe intended to do? And I think it could be anything, whether
Yep.
it be a form of exercise or maybe a change in your diet. Maybe with your guidance, Justin, like how much should we maybe kind of take on, and what sort of like goals do you think are actionable and also achievable maybe for somebody that's kind of just stepping in?
Sure. So of course, when we do these things, right, there's often like the outliers that may miss this, right? But I want to try to make this as broad as possible. I would love to see if everyone wanted to try the next 30 days, a 1 minute walk, a 10-minute walk, right? No more than 10 minutes. A 10-minute walk. I think everyone can find 10 minutes, right? Way, if you're sitting too long at the desk, oh right, Justin said I need to do that 10-minute walk, and Jordan might ask me about it in 30 days. And the group holds everyone accountable. What's great about this is it's similar to when you decide, hey, I'm taking on a goal. It's great to tell your best friends and your loved ones around you, to Jordan's point, right? So they can be supportive of your goals. Maybe they're not on the journey with you. In this context, everyone's on the journey together. But it's great because then everyone can check in with you and maybe even just talk about how are you feeling? Like, are you able to do this? What's going on? All the good stuff. Good, effective communication. It's very therapeutic in nature. I think a 10-minute walk is doable for most people as long as they're physically capable, and it doesn't take too much time. And I think it can be a wonderful maybe reset in the day or way to just break up the monotony of sitting too much or doing something for too long.
And this takes me back to one of the earlier episodes when we read Atomic Habits of how do we make this stuff, like what's a low barrier to entry, or like
Or the
how do
lowest
we
hanging fruit.
right, like how do we create easy wins, like making this stuff achievable, making it obvious, pairing some of these things. So okay, 10 minutes after dinner, for instance, keeping, let's say, our walking shoes by the door instead of having them in the basement, because that creates more friction between getting to the behavior that we're actually desiring to engage with. So what I would suggest is perhaps in the wellness policy channel on the Post Wrestling Discord, I think it might be helpful for all of us to think about maybe like 1 or 2 things we want to commit to with some sense of regularity, whether that's a daily 10-minute walk, maybe adding more vegetable to one of our meals each day, for instance, and being kind to ourselves, being flexible, realizing that, okay, maybe after a few days, it doesn't seem like reasonable or feasible. And okay, so we can change it. But the idea of literally writing it out instead of keeping it in our heads and sharing it with the community, I think helps us get way closer to making this stuff more realistic, feeling the support in it. And I can commit to checking in with some regularity, maybe a few times a week, of like, hey guys, where are we at? This is where I'm at, and curious where you're at too. The community aspect is key, realizing we are intentionally cultivating a very welcoming, non-judgmental community. And with the 10 minutes, great. For some people, they might think like that's too easy. Okay, then maybe do a bit more. For some people, 10 minutes may seem overwhelming, either because of their physical abilities or just time management or something else. So maybe for them, their 10-minute walk each day could be, I don't know, choosing to take the stairs at work instead of an elevator, for instance, or not drinking soda after 6 p.m., for instance. But I think this could be a helpful exercise for us to at least take time individually to consider what are some possible easy wins for us that could make a meaningful difference if we commit to it over a longer period of time.
Look, I would love to see everyone maybe just join together, right? The community aspect, right? The rising tide that raises all the boats and can also sink all of us together, right? I think that's why when I say like, hey, 10 minutes, right? There might be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% of people in a set group who may not be able to do said thing, right? It might be too much for someone, right? And then there might be the group on the other end where like this is too easy. But I think everyone can be in support of the group in that, hey, if we do this one thing together, and of course, right, if the ability is not there, you do the best you can with it. And if you want to go for longer, that's totally fine too. Maybe your fitness level is higher and you decide that like, I want a little extra cardio or just like an extra therapeutic walk in my day. That's totally fine too. But yeah, look, I think like not that this is like a 30-day challenge that kicks off, it kicks in and inspires and kicks off someone's health journey. But of course, like this could be the thing that kicks off their health and wellness journey.
So postwrestling.com/Discord, join us, set your intentions, and then we'll check up with everybody throughout the month. And also maybe the three of us will specifically check up with each other at the on the next edition of the wellness policy. So thank you so much, Justin, for coming on the show and just telling us so much about your own journey and telling us so much about Jordan and his youth of eating grass as well.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Any final words from the few of you? Well, first of all, Justin, where can people find more of you and what you do at Grow?
Grow, GRO, Maryland, spelled all the way out.com. Best place.
Wonderful. And Neal and Jordan, what else do you guys have going on in your lives?
Tomorrow I'll be keeping up with news on the site. I'm doing a rare Wednesday, so check out postwrestling.com for the latest. And I want to give a very quick shout out because I thought I was going to be deluged last Saturday because it was my day at the weekend, and I wasn't. It was quite the opposite because of the team of contributors who were doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the show reports. So, Jack Wannon was doing Triple Mania. Dave LeClaire had done the Saturday shows, Collision and Battle of the Belts. John Pollock himself covered Slammiversary. John Pine did the GCW show. John Kleinchester had done everything that needed done on SmackDown and Rampage on the Friday night. The great Eric Marcotte, who was on Detox, did a great appearance on Detox, I thought, last week. He did the UFC fight night. So there's a ton of, and actually left me with like, well, what news is there left for me to cover? So, but it just speaks to what the site has really become, I think. I know I'm getting away off topic, but I just really wanted the platform to say that, that you've got a bunch of very talented writers who are able to do all of this. So shout out to all of them.
Thank you so much for saying that, Neal. It is really the fastest growing aspect of our business. A lot of attention being put in, a lot of amazing work being put over at postwrestling.com right now in our written form. So please go check that out, bookmark it, check it, make it a part of your 30-day challenge, okay? Bookmark and read postwrestling.com. How about you, Jordan Goodman?
Yeah, as Neal said, I'll direct everyone to the Poison Rana free feed, my sometimes monthly show with Braden called Detox. We had Eric Marcotte as a guest. He shared some really like left field news with us, but very impressive nonetheless. It's critically acclaimed, and Braden said just the number of downloads alone, they might have to like start paying more monthly in order to maintain their hosting. So Detox on the Poison Rana feed, highly recommend it. And new music by Queens of the Stone Age and Blur, I would recommend as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you everybody for listening. Again, postwrestling.com/discord. Just sign in. Even if you don't have anything maybe productive to say, just say hi. That's all. Thank you guys. We'll talk to you guys next month. Bye-bye.